Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eric Black and today we are talking all about my reed break-in process. Now, if you've ever gone into a lesson or a performance and thought to yourself, man, I could have done so much better if it just wasn't for my terrible reed, well then this video is probably for you. Whether your reeds are too hard, too soft, or just never seem to play well, hopefully this reed break-in process can help alleviate some of your cane-related woes. Before we get too far, let's talk about why it's important to break in our reeds. First of all, it's important to remember that our reeds were once living organisms and therefore exhibit all the traits of organisms or things that were once living. What I mean by that is they absorb water. They expand and contract depending on the temperature or the humidity levels, and all of these changes or variables can impact how your reed performs from day to day. By breaking in our reeds properly, we can reduce the impact these environmental changes have on our reeds and therefore get a much more consistent and stable playing experience. Now, to start with, take all of your reeds out of their packages and with a permanent marker write the date on the heel end of the reed. I break in a full box of reeds at a time, however I perform and practice a lot. To the average band student, I would recommend breaking in at least 4 reeds at a time. You want enough to have options and enough for a proper reed rotation. We rotate our reeds so they don't lose their luster too quickly. To do this, I recommend switching to a different reed every time you take your instrument out to practice, play in a rehearsal, or perform in a concert. A professor once told me that if we are rotating our reeds properly, we can expect to get at least 10 hours of playing time out of a good reed. While anecdotal, I have always found this to be pretty accurate. Time for a quick reed anatomy sidebar. The two main components of a reed are the xylem and the pith. The xylem are the little tubes that run through the reed. When the plant was still living, these were used to transport water through the plant. You can see the xylem quite easily by wetting the heel end of the reed. Wetting the reed causes the outline of circles to become more apparent. These circles are the ends of the xylem, the tubes that run the length of the reed. The pith is all the material that fills the space in between these tubes. When we wet our reeds with our saliva, some of the natural sediment from the reed gets pulled into and hardens in the xylem. Over a long enough break-in process, the xylem eventually becomes filled with this sediment. I liken it to filling a wooden tube with concrete. This causes the tube to become much more resistant to external forces. It takes much longer for the xylem and the structure of the reed to collapse. I do want to address that I have heard others say that this sediment buildup can make the reed sound brittle. Well, this has never been my experience. Everyone has a different relationship with their own equipment, and perhaps that has been their experience with their own setup. Alright, to demonstrate the openness of a new reed xylem, watch this awkward video of me blowing air through a new reed into a cup of water. You'll notice that bubbles are coming out of the end. The xylem has not been filled with sediment at all, and so the air moves straight through it like it's a straw. When a reed is properly broken in, you will no longer be able to blow air through it like this. Now let's get back to actually breaking in the reeds. So one at a time, wet your reeds with your saliva and play on them. For this first session, we are only going to play on them for about 15 to 30 seconds. I don't play super loud or super high. I also don't do any serious articulation. I'm just looking to get a sense of how the overall reed sounds and responds. We are trying to break in our reeds slowly and gently. They need to get used to the new stresses we are putting on them. If we were to just slap them on our mouthpieces and play them for an hour, by the end of that hour, our reed would be totally kaput. It's very hard to revive or reuse a reed that has initially been used like that. Anyway, when I have gotten a sense of how the reed plays, I will take it off and put a little tally on the heel of the reed. This represents that the reed has been played for 1 day. I refrain from putting any other indicators such as hard or soft on the reed at this time, as the reed will change considerably in the coming days. After the reed has been marked, I put it in my reed case and move on. And that brings us to reed cases and storage. I've used pretty much every reed case known to man at one point or another. For the last 3 to 4 years, however, I have taken to using a combination of the Vandoren Hygro cases and the Diodario color reed guards. With one Hygro case and one reed guard, I can break in a full box of 10 reeds. Both of them allow for some kind of airflow under the reed, which lets them dry out more evenly than putting them on glass or plexiglass plates. After my reeds are in their respective cases, I take those reed cases and put them in a Tupperware container or large plastic bag with a couple of humidipacks to help regulate the humidity level of the container the reeds are stored in. This reduces the potential for the reeds to warp as it slows down the drying process, and also makes sure the reeds don't over dry, which will also contribute to a reed warping. You may need more or less of these packs depending on the natural humidity levels in your part of the world. If you use a glass-based reed case, that's great. You should use whatever works for you. When I start running out of space in my normal reed box, I often use a couple of these Galax reed cases for the overflow reeds. They are made in Japan, and each case can hold 10 reeds by itself. I do notice a difference in the way my reeds break in with these cases, but it's not necessarily bad, just different. So at this point, you have played on all of your reeds and you have stored them in a case and hopefully some kind of humidified container. Great, now let's wait till tomorrow. Alright, it's a new day. Now we get to do it all again, except we are going to play our reeds a little longer today. Play your reeds for 2 to 3 minutes. Again, don't play too high, loud, or articulate too much. We still are trying to ease our reeds into the stress of having to vibrate at frequencies of hundreds of times a second. When you're done playing on a reed, put another tally on its heel and immediately return it to your case and storage container. This pattern of progressively playing a reed a little longer will last for a week. When you have 7 tallies on the reed, it is fully broken in. The lengths I generally play on reeds are as follows. If you don't have this kind of time to devote to breaking in reeds, just try and play on them every day for at least 5 minutes after day 3. Some playtime is better than no playtime, and while they might take a couple of extra days to feel like fully broken in reeds, they will get there eventually. Some things to note. By day 3, I am starting to play the reed as I would normally. I use articulation. I am not too careful about dynamics, and I am not worried about how high I play. In fact, if by day 3 I have discovered that a reed is particularly hard and difficult to produce a sound from, I relegate that reed to be used for exactly those 3 things. I've never seen anyone else talk about this, and I have no empirical data, but sometimes putting a hard reed through those stresses early on in its lifespan can make it considerably easier to play by the time it's broken in. This doesn't work for every hard or bad reed, but it does work for some of them in my experience. If you are a person that works on their reeds, then I would start working on them around day 3 or 4. Alright, so after you've gone through this full week of breaking reeds in, you generally know at this point which reeds are hard, which are soft, and which are just right. I usually mark them as such at this point. I like to have some range of hardness in the reeds I play. Some reeds are better suited to certain acoustic environments. For instance, if I'm playing in a really big hall with a lot of reverberation, I feel a little more comfortable using a reed on the harder side, as the stuffiness and extra air in the sound generally gets lost in the larger space, while I get a little more depth to my sound. If I am in a smaller or drier space, I am more likely to use a slightly softer reed, as there generally isn't so much stuff in the sound to distract from my playing. Most of the time, however, I am saving my reeds that are just right for my performances, as they tend to sound good no matter the acoustic environment. In general, I try to work on my reeds as little as possible. It's not that I am not confident in my ability to improve them, it's just that there are only so many hours in the day, and I can generally make do without needing to spend a lot of time fixing them. It isn't unless I have a big concert, audition, or other similar performance coming up that I really sit down and make sure my reeds are playing in tip-top shape. I hope this was a helpful guide to breaking in your own reeds. I'm going to end this video by saying that by the time you've completed this process and your 4 or 10 reeds are broken in, it's about time to start the process over again. You should always be breaking in some reeds. You want to avoid running into a situation where your broken in reeds are starting to die, but your reeds that are being broken in have not yet stabilized and can be played for long periods of time. By making sure that you're always breaking in some reeds, then you never run out of usable reeds. If you have any questions or you use a different reed break-in method entirely, please let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, happy practicing.